Oh, hey, look at that. But we've already passed it.
Okay.
All of our insults have happened. So.
Wow. All right. Yeah. I'm calling Chris Anderson. I'm seeing a little error message here on the screen, so I'm not sure what's
sorry.
going on.
Well, no,
So
I'm here, and I'm in studio W1. So for just tonight, because my daughter left, so I got the studio back and put it all back together again. But I'll be leaving soon. So, and you're in Chicago?
I am in Chicago in the same old place. We're having some problem here with we're not coming up on our Facebook site, on our History Happy Hour Facebook site. So people are gonna, hey, if you know somebody who's trying to watch us on Facebook, I'll play the open. We'll get started, and I'll put something up there for people to tune in.
Yeah.
But welcome
Facebook's,
those of you able to make it here so far.
Well, no, we got a bunch of people from Facebook. Doreen says hello, and Ann
I don't know.
says hello.
Okay, well, I'm getting some kind of weird message. Oh, it's the Stephen Ambrose Facebook page. Oh, that's fine.
Stop hitting buttons. Jeez.
Welcome everybody to History Happy Hour. Thanks to Stephen Ambrose Historical Tours, where no one can see this show right now, for helping to bring you the show. Check out their rich offering of military history tours at stephenambrosetours.com. And whether you're watching live, watching on replay, or listening on the HHH
podcast,
yeah, we are glad you're here today, and we're going to be talking about Naples during World War II. Let us know what you're drinking. We hope that you are drinking, because that is the only real way to experience this show. And we should thank everybody, Chris, who supports us on Patreon.
Absolutely,
especially our top shelf patrons.
There we go. I like to
But
Susan's still hanging out alone down there.
Well, we did get a new patron this week, but they weren't a top shelf patron, so they don't make the list. So we're still grateful that they joined us. Grateful. But they maybe in a while they'll see the light and want to upgrade. But you can become a patron by going to patreon.com/historyhappyhour.
Absolutely.
Is there anybody out there watching us, Chris?
There are quite a few, actually. Ann Ballard Bryant from Little Rock. And I mentioned Doreen. Doreen's back again, so we're happy
Nice to see you, Doreen.
Ted Mueller, Jim Booten from Ontario. Always good to have somebody from Ontario watching.
Got anybody from Spain yet?
No, Xavier hasn't joined us. So we
probably have some people from Great Britain. I mean,
I would hope so.
Maybe Lizzie Borden's here. I don't know, whatever.
She is.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. So, okay, well, do we have enough? Do we have a sufficient group of people with which to start the show?
I believe so. You ready?
All right. Give me a cue.
Your bell, you got to spend some time practicing. It's like, thank you.
I think the mic, it's the filtering software.
How hard is it to ring a bell, Rick?
I'm ringing the bell beautifully. It's beautifully rung. It's just the equipment is not carrying the beauty of that ring to you.
Okay.
I'm so sorry, Chris.
Thank you. All right. Well, just saying.
The bar is open. What's on tap?
Well, other than our witty repartee,
which we've pretty much just run the gamut.
Yeah, we've exhausted that. Yeah. But I'm really excited that we have Keith Lowe back with us. Keith is, for those of you who don't remember or don't know, is the author of the critically acclaimed Inferno, The Devastation of Hamburg, 1943, Savage Continent, which was an international bestseller, and the winner of both the Hessel-Tiltman Prize for History and Italy's prestigious Cherasco History Prize. And he's with us to talk about his new book, Naples, 1944, The Devil's Paradise at War. And Keith has been on the show before, so we're very, very happy to have him back. So Keith, thanks for coming back.
Welcome to your third trip through hell. I mean, your third episode.
I'm lucky.
Did you bring a cocktail, Mr. Lowe?
I did. I'm not really a cocktail man. I'm more of a pint of beer man. So I've put myself one here. I've got a pump just on this side of the desk. You can't see it. I'll just top it up every now and then.
Well, you said you're in your shed, so that would be possible.
Right, the history shed there, yeah.
My history shed, where my wife banishes me every when she gets fed up.
It's like, oh no, you're on the History Happy Hour show. We're going to get out.
Chris, did you bring a drink of some sort?
Yeah, Edredor 11 this time.
Nice.
I'm out of my Glen Turret.
I brought beer, but I bought the beer and I wasn't really looking at what I was buying, I think. And I got this beer called Freebird. I guess this is the beer that if you're looking for somebody to call out a beer you want to drink, they go, Freebird, can you do
Right?
Freebird? So
And
I'm drinking a Freebird beer here. So
is that beer or is that just
it's a little
water?
mild. Yeah. No, it is beer, but
I could read the newspaper through that beer. Is that
okay? Fine, Chris, get us started. Remember, this show is not about you and me; it's about Keith.
That's true. So now that we've all joked, let's get really serious here. So, Keith, in 1943, Edgar Erskine Hume, who I'm sure we will talk about, said this. He said, "At the time of our arrival, the city was in darkness. There was no electric power, gas, sewage disposal, means of collecting refuse, facilities to bury the dead, air raid signals, telephones, ambulance service, fire protection, telegraphs, postal service, streetcars, buses, taxis, funiculars, railways, or regular water supply. Police organization had broken down, and after days of terror, there was almost a state of anarchy. No schools were open. Courts were not functioning. The great port, second largest in Italy, had been almost wholly destroyed. All banks were closed, and the city's financial system was at a standstill. There was filth in the streets, and all the shops were closed. Food was practically unobtainable, and people were starving. All these things were added to the widespread destruction of public and private buildings. Despair was everywhere." So, could you tell us a little bit to kind of introduce everybody to the book? What had brought Naples to this point?
Right. Okay. Well, there are lots of things which brought Naples to this point.
I know I'm not even going to get a question in because it's going to take me 40 minutes.
No.
I'll summarize.
Okay.
I mean, the first thing is Mussolini going to war in the first place, which was entirely unnecessary. He didn't need to. But once they'd gone to war, that then brings the bombers. And in 1943, the bombers came en masse, a dozen times, in fact, just in 1943 alone. Naples was the most bombed city in Italy. Over 100 bombing raids just on Naples, mostly aiming for the port. But, it's 1940s technology. They don't always get what they're aiming at, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of destruction from that. But that is nothing compared to what the Germans did. Because, of course, when Italy switches sides in September, 8th of September, 1943, the Germans, they know that the Allies are coming. They find out that the landings have happened at Salerno, and they do not want to leave anything behind that the Allies can use. Right. So they systematically blow up everything. And they start with the port. They sink over 300 ships in the port, and then sow mines all around them. They knock down all the cranes and put them in the port as well. Then they go around all the harbour buildings and blow them up. Then they go to all the major public buildings and blow them up, and the stations and the electricity supply and the water supply, the sewers. I mean, they blew up everything. The place was absolutely carnage by the end of it. So, when the Allies are arriving, they're not coming into a nice, neat city that they can use. It's just rubble, a lot of it. Yeah. So it's really, really awful what the Allies discovered when they first arrived in Naples.
Yeah. And how did that compare with the expectations of Allied soldiers who were coming there? Did they understand what they were coming to, or did they have some other idea in their mind?
Yeah, not really. No, I mean, Naples is one of these really romantic cities. It's during the 19th century, it was the end of the Grand Tour. You'd go down through Germany and Italy to Florence, and you go to Rome, and you'd end up in Naples, where you'd have a glass of wine and relax and look at the paintings, and then come home again. And so it's always had this sort of idea of being a kind of pleasure city, a place to relax and look at the beautiful Amalfi Coast, marvel at the volcano and its power. And then, and the food. I mean, we all know about Naples food. It's beautiful food. Of course, in 1943, there's no food. It's all been taken. It's been looted and everyone's starving. So... And so they're expecting something very different to what they see when they get there. Absolutely.
Keith, I didn't want to kind of rob us of too much to talk to, but the reason I read that quote was that that's just the start of your story. And usually, when I read a book about the Second World War, the Jeeps come up, but they've driven the bad guys away, and sunshine, flowers, and rainbows will follow. But that's not really the story that you tell in the book. So maybe now is the time to say, so what kind of brought you to this story, the stories of Naples, and what did you see that was missing in sort of our perception of what happened?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've had me on the show before. You know that my thing is not the war itself and the the fighting and the it's what happens next is what really interests me, because that's what I wrote about in Savage Continent for the whole of Europe.
Right.
But this is really taking that story and narrowing it right down to a single city.
Yeah.
I chose Naples because it was the first city that the Allies liberated on mainland Europe. So, what they found there is like an omen of what's going to come in all the other cities they liberate later on. So Naples is really the first one. So that's why I chose it. But yeah, the once you enter a place that's been destroyed, the fighting is over by this point. But that doesn't mean your troubles are over, because there's nothing there. There's no infrastructure. People are starving. There's no money. There's no food. In Naples there was no water, so they've got to bring in trucks of water. So otherwise, people are gonna die of thirst. There are plenty of stories of people going to burst pipes in the road to fill up water bottles, and they don't know whether these pipes are the drinking water or the sewers. They don't care. They're thirsty. So it's a disaster waiting to happen. All the things which come after the liberation are just as devastating, often, sometimes even more so than the actual war itself.
Yeah.
So you write about the U.S. Army in Naples, and again, I think it's fair to say that your book is kind of really focused on the Italian citizens of Naples as opposed to the Americans or the Germans. But you write about the U.S. Army, and they do some things pretty well. They solve the water crisis that you mentioned. They eventually eradicate typhus. They take a little too long to get to it, but they get the sabotaged docks up and running. So there's a lot of U.S. Army know-how that's being demonstrated here, but they're very clumsy in some of their political dealings and other areas, which has all sorts of repercussions. So you suggest that multiple times this plays an impact on the next 20, 30, 40 years in Naples. Can you give us some examples of Allied short-sightedness and why? Why does it happen? Is it just bad planning? Is it lack of planning? Is it prejudice? What's going on here?
Okay. Well, I mean, like you say, I don't want to be too hard on the US Army, or indeed the British Army, because they did do some incredible things. They got that place up and running in an incredibly short time, given the destruction that they were dealing with, getting the water back online, getting electricity going, and getting food into the city to a degree. I mean, they did a pretty good job, and getting the port back up and running. I mean, like I said, 300 ships are sunk in that harbor, and the whole thing's full of mines. And yet the first Liberty ship docked there 3 days after the Allies arrived. And that's just incredible. They managed to get the place going in such a short time. So yes, they did do some amazing things. But they're military men. They know how to do like practical stuff. But dealing with people is a different matter. It takes a different skill set. You need people who are skilled at politics, at getting the local population on board, winning hearts and minds, that kind of thing. And they really weren't prepared for the scale of what they had to do. And they also didn't really know, they're dealing with half the people are fascists, half of them are communists. There's like a nascent, resistance movement growing in Naples, and the new political parties are starting up. Everybody's clamoring for a voice, and the Allies don't know who to put in charge. They don't know who's a fascist and who isn't. Half of them, in fact, most of the Allied military government who set themselves up there don't even speak Italian. So how can you start? How can you start to put things back in order if you don't even speak the language? So yeah, there was a lot of blundering along, because naturally their thoughts are on winning the war. They're thinking about Casino, not about Naples. They're trying to win the war. So yeah, the civilians get neglected. And I can give you a couple of examples. I mean, what immediately springs to mind is the food factories. Naples is surrounded by incredibly fertile land. There were canning factories all around. You've got all the fruit and vegetables growing in abundance. The easiest thing to do would be to get those factories up and running, and then they start preserving the food, putting it in cans, and then feeding themselves. But rather than spending a little bit of resource on creating those factories again, they neglected that all the way through to the end of the war and beyond. And instead, they shipped their own food in all the way from the US or Argentina or wherever. They shipped food right the way across the Atlantic, taking up valuable space, which could have been filled with ammunition instead or something, and fed the people that way. So it's just really just inefficiencies. They hadn't quite thought it through because they didn't know how bad the destruction was going to be.
So Keith, I mean, you've obviously just kind of alluded to this, but kind of backing up a bit, clearly the Allies that know that they're going into either occupied territory or territory that has been fought over to kind of writ large, and then what preparations are they actually making to govern territory they come into? I mean, you talk about the Allied military government and their lack of preparation. Are these separate units? Is there an organization that's told, hey, you're the guys that are going to do this? And I mean, you've hinted at this, like they're not prepared, but what preparations, what is it?
Okay. Well, they set up a new unit for Italy, the Allied military government occupied territories, AMGOT, and it's really set up in Sicily to start off with. But when they're setting it up in Sicily, Italy's on the other side. They're the enemy, so they've got a completely they've got that sort of mindset. Well, they're setting the Italians are going to be the enemy. Suddenly things change, and the Italians swap sides. So suddenly they're not the enemy anymore. They're now kind of on your side. So there's got to be a change of mindset. You know, how do you then get them on board and have them helping you govern? And that has to be done very quickly, and they're not prepared for it, and they kind of make a bit of a shambles of it. Yeah, and they're trained in a way that they have all these ideas about what Italy's going to look like. But if you read any of the memoirs of these guys who became Allied military government, they say, we were told one thing, we got there, it bore no resemblance to anything that we've been taught. We were just making things up as we were going along. It was chaotic.
Yeah.
I want to bring in a question from one of our viewers, and it sort of jumps ahead a little bit, but we don't want to make Wally wait here, so we'll bring it in. But he says, did the Allies' experience in Naples prepare them for what would happen after D-Day? And I would broaden that to say, did they, and maybe it's like, is there a happy ending here? But did they learn from what happened in Naples and improve? Because there's a lot more cities that are going to be liberated during the war.
Yeah, I mean, Naples was kind of the testing ground where they made all their mistakes. And they did learn from some of them. So, for example, they realized that food was going to be a much bigger issue. And it's not just the food. It's sometimes the food is there, but it's just in the wrong place. It's outside the city. You've got to get the food into the city. And of course, all the transport's been destroyed. So how do you get the food in to feed everybody? So they realized that they were going to need a lot more transport, a lot more jeeps, a lot more trucks. And so when they arrived in Normandy, they were massive. The amount of material that was pouring into Normandy was far, far greater than they had coming into Salerno. I mean, exponentially greater, not only for the army, but also for the local population. They had much higher rations for the population in Normandy, because they'd learned that they'd only planned for a small amount of rations because they figured that people would feed themselves from the lush farmland around. That didn't happen. And as a consequence, the prices of food skyrocketed. There was like a horrendous black market. People had to sell their clothes, their furniture, sell their bodies as well, if you're a woman, just in order to be able to buy food. That was much less the case when they got to Normandy. It was still there, but much less than it had been in Italy.
So we've been talking a little bit. We'll talk more about kind of what happens when the Allies come in, but I do want to back up a bit, because another kind of aspect of the story is what Neapolitans are doing in the face of some pretty sort of horrific circumstances before that. So what was sort of Naples' place in Mussolini's empire? I know he called it the Queen of the Mediterranean, and he had big plans for it. I mean, how did the Neapolitans view that? Was that always a troubled relationship? Were they kind of on board?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tricky question, because
right. Because if it's a tricky question for us now, it must have been awful for the Allies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Naples and there's Naples, right?
Right.
Naples traditionally was a very kind of communist city. Actually, there was a lot of industry there, lots of trade union activity, and lots of communists, especially in the docks and so on. And they hated the fascists, absolutely hated them, and were very glad to see the Allies arrived. But on the other hand, like you said, Mussolini had these big plans for Naples, wanted to make it the sort of gateway to Italy's empire in Libya and North Africa and so on. So, Naples had been neglected by the central Italian government for decades, for almost a century, actually, before then. And so suddenly there was this sort of sense of pride growing through the Mussolini era. So there were plenty of fascists there too, who were,
right.
But then, the war came and destroyed everything, and a lot of them realized that the promises of fascism weren't really going to come off.
Right.
So you actually get lots of fascists also resisting, sometimes making like local pacts with the communists and fighting against the Germans. So it's a very complicated situation.
It's a very complicated situation, yeah.
We talked about what was it, like communist organizations that had people who had been fascists signing up to be part of them. I mean, everybody sort of there's a certain amount of everybody wants to be on the winning side. So if fascists aren't the winning side, we better get on another side.
Yeah, but it's more than that. I mean, there was, once the Germans started destroying Naples, and not only destroying the city, they also started rounding up all the men to take them off as slave labor. And that was kind of the last straw. So that's when there was a city-wide uprising. We've all heard of the Warsaw uprising, but actually, a year before, Naples is upright. It's the first city to have an uprising.
You're talking about the 4 days.
4 days.
4 days of Naples, yeah. Before the Allies have even arrived.
Yeah, tell us about that. Because I think we often kind of think of the Americans and British land at Salerno, and they come up and they liberate Naples, but Naples kind of has actually liberated itself a little bit first. So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely, yeah. And, you can't find a book in English about the 4 days of Naples. So my book's the only one, which has a big chunk.
Well, in fact, we joke about it, but I wasn't even aware of it until I saw the book.
Yeah, and it's not just us in the English-speaking world. Even in Italy, in northern Italy, they think of the resistance against the Germans. They think of that as like a northern phenomenon. It happened around sort of Milan or Bologna or wherever, and they don't really register that actually right at the very beginning, the first uprising happened in Naples, and it's just because the city is being destroyed. They're taking the men away, and people have had enough. They've hidden their guns when with the surrender, and now they come and dig them out again, and they build barricades in the streets. These barricades are manned by men, women, and children. So there's plenty of children there as well. Skunietsi, they were called, little street kids who were actually the highest award for valor in Italy is the gold medal. And the two people who won the gold medal for bravery in Naples for fighting against the Germans were both under 18. One of them was a 13-year-old boy, Gennaro Capozzo, his name was. And he died attacking a tank with a hand grenade. He was running up to a German tank to try and blow it up. So you've got the whole community, men, women, and children, rising up against the Germans, and it worked. They kept them out of the city centre, and then they eventually, I mean, the Germans were going to be moving off anyway, but they were kind of chased out. They left before they could destroy everything because the people wouldn't let them. It's really a quite heroic story.
Well, and Keith, could you tell? I mean, like, what are we talking about in terms of size? Because when I first heard about, I just was doing some of the reviews of the book, I thought, oh well, there's some shots fired as the Germans are leaving, and yeah, it's an uprising, but about something. No. What are we talking about? This in terms of size and scope. This is a major battle.
Yeah, absolutely. Naples is a big city, right? So there was a million people living there at the time. Right. So the whole of the city centre was barricaded off. And because the streets are so narrow, the Germans couldn't get in their armoured cars. They tried to, but the people just threw like explosives down on top of them from these sort of tall canyon-like alleys. And they were massacred. They couldn't do it. They had to withdraw, and so the whole of the city centre was left intact. But not just the city centre. There's a hill with another suburb. There was a massive battle up there involving hundreds of troops. There was a siege of the main barracks, which was in a sports stadium. The Italians surrounded it and besieged it, and wouldn't let them go until they'd met with the commander of the city and agreed a peace deal where they would release the hostages and then they would leave the city. So they were kind of chased out. There were elements of the air raid people getting their artillery and firing them onto the tanks that were coming down to try and destroy the city. So there's proper big battles going on here. It was pretty major.
So, Keith, one of the things that I found interesting in your book, and this may be, I don't know, maybe this is a little too much behind the scenes, but you don't do it in chronological order. You start out with the liberation and dealing with the American Army in Naples and some of the issues there. And then in the second part of the book, you jump back and you talk about all the things that happened between when Mussolini is deposed in July of 43 until up till the 4 days leading up. And I'm wondering why you decided to write the book in that order, right? What was your thinking here, or did you write it in another order and then change it? I just found myself really curious about this, so I wondered. Come on, give us the scoop. What's the story?
Okay, yeah. I mean, I did start off. I tried it different ways round, and this was the way I decided to land up on, because I wanted to tell the traditional story. The Allies arrive, they land at Salerno, they come up, they liberate the city, and then they have to deal with all the mess. Right? That's the sort of way we in Britain and America would expect the story to go. But as you get further on, and more and more trouble starts, and the local population are getting a little bit pissed off with the Allies, and you kind of think, I can see why they're getting annoyed, but it's a bit unreasonable. We have liberated them after all, and at that point, I want to then go back and say, oh, hang on, did we liberate them? and from the Italian point of view, and so you then see why they're so proud. And they feel so disenfranchised, because they are, from the beginning of this uprising, they are fully behind the Allies. They want to be on the Allied side. They want to join up with the Allies and fight against the Germans. And they're prevented from doing so because, of course, naturally, the Allies don't know if they can trust them or not. They don't know who's the fascists and who are the... But from the Italian point of view, come on, guys, we're in it together. Let's go and bash the Germans. And we're being held back. And not only that, when we don't have food, we don't have any say, we don't have any democracy. You promised us democracy. Why can't we start electing our representatives? And so on. And they get more and more frustrated.
So, but getting back to the uprising, why do you think it is that people don't know about it? Even you said even in Italy, this is sort of just lost. So why don't we know about this? You would think, especially, I'm thinking about like post-war, a lot of these countries, they look for these moments to say, well, there were a few of us that fought against, fascism. The Germans love to talk about the White Rose and Klaus von Stauffenberg. And, everybody tries to find sort of an angle. So you would think that this story for the Italians would be everywhere.
Yeah, you would, wouldn't you? But there's all sorts of political reasons for this, and also historical. Naples has always there's been prejudice against Naples within Italy for centuries. They they have like racist terms, and they call it the Africa of Europe, with all the racist connotations that has, and that's been going on for centuries. Right. So there's that. So how could these people who are very backward be, have a proper uprising? Their uprising wasn't real. It was just a sort of, it's just like a riot.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yeah. So there's that aspect. There's also, the political situation when the Allies got there was very delicate because although Mussolini had been deposed, Badoglio, who took over next, had been, along with all the other fascists, he was basically the same as all of them. And he's still allowed to run the country. And you've got the king there as well. Now, the king, he's the one who installed Mussolini in the first place. He had multiple opportunities to get rid of him and didn't. And so the king is really tainted. And things would change later. And especially the people in the resistors in the north all hate the king as well. But when the Allies are there, they're not allowing the local Italians to set up their own political parties. They want to keep the king in place, and they want to keep Badoglio in place because they think they know where they are with them, so they'll keep them regardless of the fact that everybody in Italy hates them. And at some point, the local political parties have to give in to this. And so they finally give in and they form a government. Now, the people in the north never forgave them for that. They said that they were basically collaborating with this evil king and Badoglio. Yeah. And so as a consequence, they kind of wrote off all the resistance and drew a line and wouldn't. So that's kind of why they haven't wanted to remember the uprising as something glorious.
I'm going to jump back to the time after the 4 days and after the liberation of Naples. You devote a chapter to prostitution, which is, largely driven by hunger, involving Neapolitan women and American and British soldiers primarily. And it's a pretty appalling story. And I have two questions, and feel free to pronounce on these however you wish. First of all, is it really worse, as it seems to be, than any other liberated city, or is that just historical myth? And you talk about there being a historical blind spot in this tale, so I would like you to touch on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, these things are difficult to quantify for obvious reasons. I mean, and nobody wants to admit that they were a prostitute in their youth, so they don't really talk about it. Here's a great picture. I mean, look at where this sailor has got his hands. It's they estimated. I read this Allied intelligence document which estimated that there were about 40,000 part-time prostitutes in Naples at the time. So if you consider there's only 400,000 women in the city, that's 10% of the women. And that's women of all ages. And some of the prostitution goes down to, it's quite sickening, to the ages of 12, 13, And there are stories in the book of Allied soldiers who openly admit to sleeping with children and bragging about it and going into graphic detail about it. It's really sickening. So there's a lot of that going on. But if you've got to feed the kids or if you've got to feed yourself, you do what you have to, don't you? So I never blame the women for this. Yeah. So the blind spot is that you just can't find any proper historical documentation of this. There are various people who've tried to interview women over the years, and nobody will talk. So you just and here am I, I'm a male historian writing about which is really a woman's story, because the women they haven't given themselves the voice. They haven't got the voice themselves. It's tragic, really. It should be. I don't know. In an ideal world, a young female academic in Naples would have found a lot of these women and interviewed them, and we'd have all their testimonies. But that just hasn't happened, unfortunately.
And it probably can't at this point.
It's getting a bit late for that. Yeah. Not a lot of these people around anymore.
So Keith, this is a question from Wally Morrison. This kind of speaks to sort of the situation that the Allies face when they get in. And you talked in the book about kind of different priorities, so it sort of touches on that. But Wally wants to know: is it now understandable how the Allies wanted to just create stability as they liberated Naples?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. That's their main priority. In fact, that's the sort of strap line of the Allied military government. They just want stability. They don't want to have to deal with anything behind the lines. They want to put all their resources up front to fight the war. So their whole policy is just to try and keep things quiet behind them, do the minimum and just keep things quiet. So they restore all the water and they get the port back up and running and all that. But politics can wait till another time. So yes, it's completely understandable. But if you're an Italian, you're there. Maybe you've got a different point of view.
Yeah.
So the other thing that you write in some detail about, are German atrocities. I'm going through all the really bad stuff that you explicate in your book, and the Germans are retreating, and they are pretty much out of control, and their atrocities rise up to and include murder of innocent children. So were there any justifications offered then or later? And when we look at this, do we say, oh, well, that's just the Germans and they were Nazis and they were evil? Or is there a kind of a warning that these are atrocities that any army might be capable of under the right circumstances?
I mean, there are a lot of things going on at the same time. I mean, they're withdrawing, right, and they're trying to take everything with them. So that's not only all the equipment, all the vehicles, and anything that the Allies might be able to use, but it's also the food in the countryside. They're taking all the livestock. So people they know that they're going to end up starving, so they feel like they've got nothing to lose. And so they rise up as well in the countryside against the Germans. But, in the countryside, you don't have the protection of these narrow alleys I was talking about in Naples, that are easy to defend. They get all their sort of farm materials and tractors or whatever and block the main road, but the tanks just go round them and then come into the town. And the Germans are scared because there are people firing at them from they don't know where. So there's that, and when you're frightened, you behave in a different way. They're also vengeful because, from their point of view, the Italians were supposed to be their allies, right? And now they swap sides. So that's treachery. So they want to get their revenge on people, and then there's just the sort of the free rein that soldiers are given in the German army to commit atrocities. It happens in Eastern Europe all over. but it also happened in Italy. I mean, just outside Naples, there's a place called Ponticelli, where the locals sort of organized a tiny little bit of resistance. They shot one German guy, and the next day the tanks rolled in and they went down the main street, taking every man out of every house and shooting him outside of his house, in front of his kids, in front of his wife, whatever. 80 people were killed just in this one street as they pulled all these men out, men and boys. That's just one. There were hundreds of these atrocities as they went north. Yeah.
But there also seems to be a bit of a, I don't know how to describe it, but talk about the cultural destruction as well, because you go into that in some detail too. It's not.
Oh God, yeah.
It's very punitive and vindictive in a way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
a lot of anger there.
Yeah.
Yes. There are lots of documents in the National Archives, in your National Archives in the States, from the monuments men, sort of laying out all the things that have been destroyed. So first of all, they destroyed the university. They set fire to the university, just as this was at the beginning of September, long before the Allies arrived, and long before they properly started destroying the city. It's just a symbol to show the people what they can do. So they killed a few people outside, and then they set fire to the university. Then they started doing some other things. So there was that whole archive of the sort of 19th century kingdom of Naples, which, you know, had documents that were just as valuable to Germany and in fact Europe as a whole, as they were to Italy. And they were all stored in this villa outside Rome. And German soldiers turned up in this villa and they said, we're just burning all this. And the caretaker was saying to them, hang on, you know, these are documents, half of them are in German. They're valuable to you too. You know, Goethe came here and they're all his letters and autographs. You don't want to burn those, surely? But they just ignored it and just burned the whole lot. You know, it's just vindictive.
Wow. So I want to remind everybody that we're chatting today with Keith Lowe, who is the author of the book Naples 1944, The Devil's Paradise at War. Keith, this is sort of a broad question, but in looking at the struggle between liberation and occupation, did you come across any morally ambiguous moments, maybe regarding Allied actions or regarding local responses that challenge conventional World War II wisdom, such as it is?
I mean, yes, in short, yes, lots. There are lots in the book. You know, we have this image of Allied soldiers as heroes, right? You know, they're doing the right thing, and they were. You just, I think you showed a picture earlier of the liberation. You know, these people, these are the Italians greeting the Allied soldiers. They're greeting them because they're heroes. They are coming to save the city, right? So yes, on one hand, they are heroic, but then when you get down to actual individual GIs and individual British soldiers, they're not there to be heroes. They're trying to survive as well. A lot of them think they're probably going to die. You know, when they get sent back up to the front, they're not going to last. So, you know, what have they got to lose? So there's a lot of looting that goes on. Some people desert and then dress up as, you know, use their uniforms to try and coerce people into giving them money or giving them goods, giving them sex. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of not very heroic behavior, basically, mingled in with the heroism that there is. So it's a very nuanced picture, I think.
Right. So okay, so you know, we've been talking about kind of that immediate, the occupation, the uprising, the liberation. But this is October 43 when the city is liberated, you know, depending how you view the liberation. But we have a whole lot more war to go.
Yes.
So what is happening to the city as the armies move forward? Because, you know, you've said that the Allied military, as they should be, are focused on winning in the war and fighting the war. So when the front line moves forward, what happens to Naples?
Well, Naples becomes the main supply hub. for the war.
Okay.
In fact, within a few months, it became the biggest port, not just in Italy, but in the world. Bigger than New York, bigger than London. There was more material passing through Naples than anywhere else. And unfortunately, sometimes up to 30% of it went missing before it even arrived at the warehouse. So there's a lot of pilfering going on at every level, sometimes on an industrial scale. And so there's a massive black market grows. So while the people are starving, there is food there. It's just at a massively inflated price that they can't afford. So the average worker got paid about $40 a month, and yet no, sorry, about $22 a month, but it was $40 a month just to buy the food. So that's not sustainable. So you can understand why people are starving. But there is food there, and it's being sold at inflated prices on the black market. And then you have a sort of the beginnings of a kind of mafia growing up, which is being fueled by all the Allied resources, massive resources coming through the city.
Right. Well, in a way, I mean,
there's two cities. There's a wealthy city living side by side.
Well, because in a way, the war kind of revives the mafia, doesn't it? In that part of Italy.
Yeah, because the beginning of the century, the mafia had been kind of wiped out before Mussolini. In fact, by the liberals, they'd through not always the most legal of means, they'd kind of purged the city of a lot of the mafia, and those who were left fled and all went to the States, where they started up.
Thank you so much, Naples. Yeah,
but then come the war. A lot of the Italians who were in New York and Chicago come back with the army and start up where they'd left off 20 years beforehand. And new groups start up because there's money to be made, and where there's money to be made, you find people taking advantage. So so there's the sheer amount of stuff coming in, and the disorganization of the port, and the allowed people to get their hands on this stuff very easily.
So one of the questions that came in from Lynn Hargrove was, he says, in France, there was a lot of retribution dished out to those who cooperated with the Germans. Did that happen in Naples regarding Germans and fascists? And I would add to that, one of the things you write about, I mean, not to tip your answer on this, but one of the things you write about is that you kind of criticize the Americans and the Allies in general for not doing more to get rid of the fascists. So to what degree are people in Italy trying to extract retribution, and to what degree are the Americans and the British trying to get these people out of the government?
Right. Okay. Well, so in the immediate, just after the Allies have arrived, remember there's been this uprising. Well, there were some Italians on the German side who were shooting at their own people from the roofs. So there was some immediate retribution when the resistors caught these guys. They just shot them, and that was the end of that. And then they started trying to get hold of some of the notorious fascists and do the same. But the Allies can't have a bloodbath going on their watch, so they clamped down on it very quickly, and they insisted on all the weapons being handed in to try and stop there being some kind of civil war behind their lines. And that caused a lot of resentment, because these people have been under the fascist thumb for 20 years, and they want justice, and they're being prevented from having their own way, and the justice isn't really coming from the Allies either, because they've got other things on their minds, right? They're fighting a war. So there wasn't really the justice that they were hoping for coming, and actually that came from the very top, because like I said, although Mussolini's gone, the government who's in charge, Badoglio's government, is full of fascists, and they're being held in place by the Allies because they just don't want any political instability. They'd rather keep the fascists there than have the chaos of elections and things like that going on.
Yeah, elections.
Yeah, I mean, who needs elections?
Well, during the war, it's kind of, we didn't have elections in Britain during the war. It was only after. So you can see the point of view, but again, as an Italian, they were very upset about this. And actually, that had a bearing on what happened later on in the war, because when Milan and Bologna and places were liberated, they weren't gonna wait around for any justice. So they went on a campaign of trying to shoot all the fascists they could. They reckon about 12 to 15,000 fascists were shot outright in the just the 2 or 3 weeks after World War II was over, just to do it before the Allies came and stopped them.
Right.
Yeah.
So Keith, I mean, we've been talking about a lot of tragedy, and we've been talking about a lot of villains, I guess you'd say, in the book. But if there are any heroes in the book, I guess you would have to say it's the Neapolitans. So maybe you can talk about sort of what they did to turn their city around, get it back on its feet. I mean, what was their part in all of this?
I mean, there are some characters during the 4 days. Some of the people involved they're such chancers. There's a sort of people you wouldn't trust normally, but they kind of come into their own when they're fighting against the Germans. It's something they believe in, and they're there to protect their city and their family, their community. They go all out. So this one guy called Enzo Stimolo, who is he takes charge of this siege of the German garrison by saying that he's a captain in the army, and he was never a captain. He was like some, I don't know, he was a private or something, but he was posing as a captain. But he took charge, and he led the campaign brilliantly. He negotiated with the German in charge and kind of liberated the city. And then he became like an agent for the Allies and went up north and was working behind the enemy lines. And I mean, this guy's amazing. He ended up, unfortunately, as kind of spoiler alert, he meets a sticky end in the end. But there are other characters as well. There's a woman called Maddalena Cerasuolo who is there on the barricades with her rifle shooting, and she becomes an American agent behind enemy lines, because she just wants to liberate her country, and there's something so heroic about that, and simple. You've got a simple idea. This is wrong, and I'm going to do something about it. Right. That's heroic, I think.
Yeah. And are they continuing that afterwards? Again, as the war moves on, as time goes, what do the Neapolitans do to kind of move forward? Because as you say, Naples in the south, they call it the southern problem. They're
yeah. I mean, there are a lot of people trying to change things. They want proper democracy to break out for the first time, really, in Naples. There's never been proper democracy there, and this was their opportunity. But every time they sort of feel like they're close, there's something which stops it happening. The Allies are they're putting barriers in the way. They don't want this. It's too complicated. And as a consequence, despite all their heroism and their battling to try and reestablish some sort of democracy, it doesn't work. And what you end up getting is the same old elites who sold the city out to the fascists in the first place, then kind of take control again.
Yeah.
So there's one. I should tell you the story about this one guy. His name was Carlo de Bellis. He was, I mean, what a piece of work. When the Allies arrived, he said that he'd been in prison, and he was in prison for his political beliefs by the fascists. Well, it turned out, and so they made him the mayor of this town. Well, it turned out he hadn't been in prison for his political beliefs. He was in prison because he was a corrupt thief. But he managed to convince the Allies. And anyway, once they found this out, they thought they should get rid of him. So he changed party he said he was a liberal, and then he changed to the Christian Democrats, and they found out what a crook he was. So they kicked him out as well. So he then moved to the Labour Democrats, and basically they just couldn't get rid of this guy. And because he was a former fascist pretending not to be. And so the Allies thought, well, who can we put there instead of him? The only option was the communist guy. And they don't want to put him in charge. And besides, it turned out he had been a fascist as well and was only posing as a communist. So what can you do? You end up with the people who are there, and there's, what can you do about it?
So we're just about out of time, but yeah, Keith, I would just ask you, this is all 80 years ago. I've been to Naples a few years ago. It's a pretty glittering city today. Naples does seem to have come back a little bit, doesn't it? And aren't you a person? I definitely get the impression who has spent a lot of time in Naples and who really loves Naples of today.
Yeah. I've been going there since the 1980s. I love that city. It's still chaotic. The
drivers are still bad.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend driving in Naples
or being a pedestrian. So don't walk or drive in Naples. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. But there's a life about the place. There's a spirit of life, which is in the food, which is in the jokes, and they're very funny people. Neapolitans, they're much fun. In the north, they haven't got the same sense of humor that they have down south. And they don't take life too seriously. They don't take rules too seriously either. But the city is flourishing at last, I think. Now it's being gentrified, which has its good and its bad. But it's a safe city to be, not like it used to be in the 80s. Lovely place. I recommend going there. It's a beautiful place.
All right. Well, Keith Lowe, thank you so much for joining us today on History Happy Hour to talk about your book, Naples 1944, The Devil's Paradise at War, but they've kicked the devil out since then. So go visit Naples and read this book before you go. Keith, thank you so much for being part of History Happy Hour.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Great, Keith. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time when you.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to get you that hat, man. Okay. Right.
All right.
Okay. Well, Chris, next week, we're going to be back. You're going to be on the road, right?
I'm going to be in Scotland next week. So what's today's? Yeah. So I'll be in Edinburgh, I think.
Today's the 10th. So we'll be doing the show on the 17th. It's the first Bears preseason game in which Caleb Williams will play.
You just lost me there. Just
it's a little technical difficulty, Rick. Some gibberish coming through. Next week, we are going to be chatting about the air war. And we're going to talk to Paul Bingley, who is one of the co-authors of the book Bomb Group, talking about the 381st bomb group fighting the air war in over the skies over Europe during World War II. So we are sticking with the big war, and we're back to military, although military versus civilian in large part here, but we're back to the Allied military actions going on.
Excellent.
So that should be fun. And it should be serious and
informative
and okay. Please subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, shout at us on Twitter. No, not on Twitter. We're not on Twitter anymore. Blue Sky. Listen to our podcast, back us on Patreon, and browse historyhappyhour.com.
Thanks, everybody. Be safe.